What's a mystery you can't believe is still unsolved? Story 1. The Setagaya family murder, in which the Miyazawa family were murdered in their home in December 2000. The killer was confident, having left fingerprints and DNA evidence, as well as the clothes he was wearing, in the house. Sand was analyzed from the scene and had sand from Edwards Air Force Base in California. Not only that, only 120 sweaters of the kind the killer was wearing were sold, somehow still not solved. Story 2. Amber Hagerman. She was about my same age and was killed in the city where I grew up. The Amber Alert system in the U.S. was named in her honor and has helped safely recover many abducted children. However, Amber's murderer was never found, and the tip hotline for her case remains open. Edit. Obviously, looking at some of these comments, there are obviously worse ways you can waste your 20s, but the sentiment still stands. Story 3. It's nothing wildly infamous, but when I got my cat, I bought him a catnip cookie toy. He'd play with that thing for hours at a time. One day, it disappeared. We've rearranged the rooms multiple times since then, and it's nowhere to be found. I know. It's probably not what you're looking for, but it's the biggest unsolved mystery I know. Story 4. Sneha Phillip, the doctor who was last seen shopping at a store near her Lower Manhattan apartment the evening of September 10th, 2001, but never returned home that night. Obviously, we all know what happened the next morning. Her husband and family hired a private detective and fought to have a review of her case done for several years before she was officially named a 9/11's victim, even though there is no solid evidence to prove she was at or in the WTC at the time, either plane struck or when the towers collapsed. But there's also no solid evidence to prove she wasn't at the WTC either. It's so crazy. In a nutshell, there are about 4 or 5 theories on what happened to her, and all of them are evenly plausible. Story 5. I grew up in a very small town. 4 people lived there named Reggie, and all of them mysteriously disappeared within 2 years. Never solved, not even a clue. Never heard from any of them again. 9 years go by. Someone named Reggie moves to the town. Within 30 days, they disappear. Never heard from again. That was 18 years ago. Still, no one knows what happened. Story 6. I was cycling home from work one day. I was 18 or 19. This is in Ireland in the early 1980s. I thought I saw my first cousin walking along the path on the far side of the road. He was living and working in a town about 25 miles away. So I went over to say hello. It wasn't my cousin. It wasn't even anyone I knew. It wasn't anyone I had ever seen before. But he knew me, knew my name, knew where I was from, called me Mr. Lone Swimmer. I got utterly flustered and confused and embarrassed and pretended I knew who he was and that I'd come over to say hello. So then I couldn't admit I had no idea who he was, and I left after a brief exchange. That was 40 years ago. I still have no idea who that was. I never saw him again. I could remember his face and voice for many years afterwards. I would even dream of him, but I've forgotten those now, except a vague sense. Story 7. Sea people. An entire civilization who destroyed a couple of empires, and very little is known about them. It's still not even known if it was on specific group. There's theories, but nothing really confirmed. Who they were, where they came from, their motivations, daily life, religion, etc. Just an entire group of people who brought down the lives of thousands, destroyed established, seasoned societies and armies, and we know very little facts about them. They are literally considered a possible huge figure in the late Bronze Age collapse, and there's just nothing known for sure. Edit. I meant there isn't a lot we know for sure. Lots of theories and speculation using a lot of random puzzle pieces, but not much definitive conclusions. Don't know too much about it, so I'm inspired to look more now. LOL. Story 8. Carlene Tengelson. In 1972, she disappeared after stopping by Westgate Mall here in Macon, Georgia. Carlene's mom got a phone call from her youngest daughter, who was at a day camp. She called because Carlene hadn't picked her up. Mr. Tengelson found the car later that night. It was parked across the street from the mall at a donut shop. At the time, the police didn't take her disappearance seriously and assumed she ran away. Years later, the police department issued a formal apology and admitted they dropped the ball. When Carlene's parents moved away a year later, they asked a neighbor if they could keep a phone with Tengelson's telephone number at their house in case she ever called. Carlene never called. Story 9. The Dyatlov Pass incident. I'm aware of the new theory that recently has been presented as a slab avalanche, but there are still questions that I don't know. Why was there high levels of radiation on the hikers? Why did they not die from impact from the slab avalanche? Most victims of such an avalanche are typically killed. Instead, They cut the tent from the inside and ran away. Also, wouldn't a slab avalanche push the tent? They are characterized by hard, blocky material. Had to Google this. I don't fully accept the idea, but I'm open to having my mind changed. Story 10. One that really messed me up when I read it was this old case of the Mattoon, Illinois gasser. Someone was spraying some sort of noxious gas into people's windows at night. It turned into mass hysteria. It fucked me up when I learned about it because 1, it's super creepy, and 2, it violates your sense of feeling safe. Just sleeping at night with your windows open, trying to get some fresh air in a time before AC, only to be gassed by some creep. Story 11. Johnny Gosh Paperboy, who went missing during his route in West Des Moines, Iowa. He was seen talking to a police officer under the bleachers at a game and asked to go on his route alone. He was told no, but went anyways. He was seen giving directions to someone, and his dog was found attached to the wagon he used for the papers. No one knows where he is, but it's suspected he was sold into trafficking and is in hiding now. His mother, Noreen, has claimed to have seen him as an adult. It's so eerie. He was also one of the first milk carton kids, I believe. Story 12. The disappearance of the 5 Sodder children. 5 of the family's 10 children vanished in a house fire on Christmas Eve, 1945. Their parents and siblings escaped, but no remains of the other 5 children were ever found. The fire did not burn that long or that hot. Remains should have easily been found of at least some of the 5 children. The fire itself seemed suspicious, and the family believed the children were kidnapped. Story 13. There is a mystery that nobody thinks is a mystery, but personally I'm suspicious. There are a lot of missing Native American teenage boys in the area around Yakima, Washington. Some of them were high risk, but not all of them. At the start of the pandemic, boys started going missing at like a 20% higher rate, and then it calmed down after the pandemic. Some as young as 12 to as old as 23. The police don't properly investigate, just write them off as at-risk teens that ran away. As of now, they are not considered connected, and there are more, but you have to dig through Yakima County missing persons. I don't know. I feel like so many serial killers get away with it because they target Native Americans. Look at the Center for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, and police in rural areas are often racist pieces of shit. I think one day we are going to uncover what's happening to these boys. Story 14, the prosecution of the Epstein clients. We have similar sworn victim and witness testimonies in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial that details the abuse of children and names Epstein clients. Billionaires, former presidents, A-list celebrities, named in court by dozens of witnesses in real court documents that are easy for the public to view on Google. The media is pretending that the sworn testimonies never happened, and the FBI is pretending that they don't have Epstein's surveillance footage. Also, J.P. Morgan settled out of court with Epstein victims for maintaining a banking network for Epstein. Is it possible for the FBI to follow banking transactions back to Epstein clients? Of course it is, but still nothing. The FBI wants to let the most dangerous child predators on Earth continue to pay people to approach our children because the predators have money. Answers yet. Story 15. I moved to rural Appalachia last year to a property of about 100 acres. It's surrounded by even larger parcels of forest, basically open wilderness. Last week, I stepped out onto the porch at about midnight, and to my surprise, I heard the loudest concert music reverberating through my forest, crowd cheering and everything. It was loud enough where I could feel the drum vibrations. My house sort of sits in its own natural holler, tiny valley surrounded by hill slopes. And BC of that, I couldn't tell which direction it was coming from at all. It was distorted enough that I couldn't tell if it was literally coming from live instruments or a recording from a speaker, but I could recognize the song Ho Hey by the Lumineers. Intrigued, I immediately grabbed my husband and we got in the car to find this concert. But this is where it gets creepy. Drive 300 feet down the road in either direction and we can't hear it anymore. It's literally the loudest at our house, which means it's not coming from the direction of any civilization, but from the forest, which makes absolutely no sense because there's literally nothing in that direction, just super dense, impassable Appalachia, no flat ground for miles. As soon as I realized this, my very next thought was to grab some flashlights and enter the forest. But honestly, as soon as that entered my mind, I felt this shiver of fear. We never go into the forest at night. Another thought, no, you know better, don't listen to them, go back inside. So we did exactly that, drove back to the house and went inside. Mulled around about how weird the whole thing was for a few minutes before stepping back out to the porch, only to find the music had stopped. The whole episode was maybe 15 minutes, Ho Hey is one of my sister's favorite songs. Me, not so much. She had been staying with us for a week and had literally left that morning. I admit I'm pretty superstitious, but I genuinely have no explanation for the loud AF concert music in the middle of bumfuck nowhere. Story 16. The Devil's Kettle Falls. There are reports saying it was solved, the water ends up in Lake Michigan, etc., but there is not proof of that. For those who don't know, the Devil's Kettle Falls are the bane of my existence. They are located in Cook County, Minnesota. It's a waterfall that splits into two streams as it comes over a wall of rock. One stream goes into the river connected to the falls, and the other stream falls directly into a hole in the rocks and disappears. Scientists have dropped all kinds of things down there like ping-pong balls, dyes, etc., and tracked surrounding water sources like lakes and rivers to see if the stuff turns up, and it never does. The theory about the water ending up in the Great Lakes is a good theory, but it hasn't been proven. The hydrologists that claimed they solved it were just looking at water levels in the stream and in Lake Michigan. And their explanation for all of the shit that's been dropped into the falls and never resurfaced is, well, the current is really strong. It probably just disintegrated everything. Hundreds of plastic items disintegrated? Get fucking real. If I am ever about to die like we know I only have a week or so left, I want to be dropped into the hole in the Devil's Kettle Falls with scuba gear so I can find out where it goes before I die. I feel like it could be like the Strid in England, but I have no idea. Story 17. The Voynich manuscript. I would really like to know what was written there and by who. It was really any message at all? What language was that? What those images represent and describe? I tend to believe that it was written by some insane person, probably with an high IQ, that in his insanity he created his own personal language and indeed tried to send a message writing it. But still, is just my theory. What if it was deciphered, but the context was too secret to be shared with the entire world? What you guys think? Story 18. The Disappearance of Asha Degree. Little girl disappeared in the middle of the night from her home back in 2000s at 9 years old. She packed up her book bag and left sometime after 2:30 a.m. People drove past this little girl as she walked around alone in the pouring rain. She fled into the woods when one person finally decided to stop and see if she was okay. Only one person of many thought it was weird to see a young girl walking around like that in the wee hours of the morning. Candy wrappers and a few small objects of hers like a pencil was found near the woods she fled into. It was thought she was a runaway and then abducted along the way, or perhaps groomed and picked up by the person at a different location. It's thought she prepared for days to leave like this. Her book bag was found over a year later, wrapped in a plastic bag, but contained items that were not hers. Nothing since reliable since. One guy in prison claimed to be responsible for her death, but that ended up not being credible. 24 years later, and that little girl has never been found. A 9-year-old little girl, walking alone in the early morning hours in heavy downpour, and only one person found that to be suspicious. That baby was running from something or even to something. I just wish we knew what. What child of that age packs a bag and leaves in the middle of a storm? I have a very hard time believing she did all that because she had a bad day at basketball practice. Story 19. I remember seeing a video about a woman that after getting divorced started getting stalked and assaulted in her own house. Every time police would arrive, no one more than her was at the scene. Sometimes she would appear with bruises, once she appeared with a screwdriver through her hand. This happened so many times that police started ignoring her calls after the investigation on her husband, and on the case left no suspects. 3 months later, she disappeared just to reappear next to a highway in the middle of the desert, miles away from her house, with her hands tied, dead. Autopsy later confirmed she was beaten to death. Creepiest shit I know. Story 20. Andrew Gosden. In 2007, Andrew took £200 from his dad's back account, took a train down to King's Cross, one of London's busiest train stations, and was never seen again. Nobody knows why he went or what happened once he arrived in London. Considering London has some of the highest CCTV per capita, it's strange to me that he was only spotted on cameras at King's Cross. Story 21. In 2019, Tony Danceman went missing like literally in front of my house. That's where the K9S lost his trail. I watched the cops stand around with binoculars looking into my family's field for hours before they did anything else. Then, a helicopter flew around for a few days, and that way basically it. A silver alert was put out, but no one ever found him. He had dementia and thought he was going out to milk his cows. They think someone driving through picked him up. It drives me crazy that that poor man was never found. I often wonder if the cops would have moved faster if they would have been able to find him. It stresses me out to think about what could have happened to him and why he was never found. Story 22. What is the true name of the most mysterious song of the internet? People were able to identify Fox on the Run based on a 1-second clip, but can't do the same with a full song where we know on which radio station it was recorded and the few dates it could have happened. Story 23. The true identity of Peter Bergman. Basically, an old guy possibly from Austria or Germany came to Sligo in Ireland and checked into a hotel using a false name and address and paying with cash up front. This was in 2009. Over the next couple of days, he meticulously disposed of all his property into bins, knowing it would be in the dump pretty quickly. He asked local taxi driver what the most beautiful spot in the area was, and the driver told him Ross's Strand. After another few days, he was fished out of the water on Ross's Strand. A post-mortem revealed he was quite a sick man with advanced cancer. Here's the thing. The Irish police have tried really hard to identify him, contacting police forces all over Europe and further afield. There is huge amounts of CCTV footage of him which has been published on the web, as well as a photograph of his face after his death. In the days before the internet, you could see something like this happening karma because the video and images wouldn't get distributed as widely. This guy's face and his story has been all over the news, and it pops into the news cycle again every couple of years. Despite that, no one has been able to identify him. The best guess as to why he did what he did was he wanted to die in a beautiful location, and his family knew what he was doing, so they haven't come forward to identify him. Story 24. My grandfather moved to the U.S. from Italy when he was 15. The home in Italy was a multi-generational household, so his grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins still lived there. When he was 17, he went back to visit and met a girl while at a gelato shop. They spoke briefly. He comes back to the U.S. and started college after summer break. 3 months after Italy. He's walking around campus with friends and sees a girl going the opposite direction. He ends up stopping her, and it's the woman from the gelato shop in Italy. Long story short, they're married now. Just celebrated their 50th anniversary.